I was just going to drop off some old design drafts for my daughter-in-law. Nothing formal, just a surprise visit on a quiet Thursday. But when I turned the corner and saw my husband's Cadillac parked right outside her gate when he was supposed to be in Atlanta for a conference, my heart stopped. I didn't honk. I didn't call. I walked to the window like a ghost, trying not to breathe. And what I heard from inside that house, it cracked something in me, shattered it. My husband's voice, my daughter-in-law's laughter, legal terms, strategy, my name, my company, my life. I stood there frozen, while the two people I trusted most plotted to rip everything I built out from under me, and I recorded every word. I'm Eleanor. I'm 61 years old, and I never thought I'd live to see the day my own husband and daughter-in-law would turn me into their exit plan, but I'm still standing. And if you're listening, I'd love for you to stay with me through this. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reaches. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. If this story touches something inside you, please consider subscribing to this channel. I'm not here to play victim. I'm here to speak the truth. And maybe remind another woman out there that she's not crazy, not alone, and not done yet. My name is Eleanor Ames, and this is the story of how I took everything back. I wasn't supposed to stop by. It was one of those small, impulsive detours, a quick visit, a warm hello, a few old design drafts I thought Callie might find inspiring. I was headed to the art fair in downtown Charleston, a place I hadn't returned to since retiring. And as I drove past the quiet curve on Moss Creek Lane, where Callie and Rhodes lived, something tugged at me. Rhodes was still stationed in Copenhagen, handling international partnerships for our urban redevelopment project. He wouldn't be home for another month. So why not mother-in-law showing up unannounced with a thoughtful little gift wasn't a crime. Not in this family. Not in my family. The iron gate was unlocked. That was strange. I'd helped design the security system for this house myself. Callie insisted she wanted something elegant but discreet, something that said Southern Grace more than Fort Knox. Still, the gate was never left open. Then I saw it. Drayton's car. His signature black Escalade polished to a fault sitting proudly in the driveway like it belonged there. Only he wasn't supposed to be in town. He'd told me just this morning that he was flying to Atlanta for a conference, some infrastructure summit he claimed couldn't be missed. My hand tightened on the steering wheel, then let go. I stepped out of the car slowly, instinctively. I wasn't ready to be angry yet. Not until I had a reason, not until I understood. I walked quietly across the gravel shoes, crunching just enough to make my heart quicken. The curtains in the front window were drawn, but not all the way. There was a 2-inch slit, and through it, I saw her. Callie sat perched on the edge of the cream linen couch I had gifted them as a wedding present. Barefoot legs crossed, a glass of wine in hand. She looked relaxed. At home. Across from her stood Drayton. He had removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. He only ever did that when he was in deep strategy mode. But it wasn't the scene that struck me cold. It was the tone of their voices. Not casual, not familial, legal, precise. She trusts you, Callie said. When she signs, it's done. I'll have the equity transferred by end of quarter. Drayton nodded calm, almost bored. The moment the signature's on the reassignment, it's clean. No way to reverse. Then came the sentence. The one that flipped my body cold from the inside out. When Eleanor signs over the rights, it's all ours. We just need to keep her comfortable a little longer. Nudge her gently. No pressure, just strategic suggestion. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my phone, and hit record. There wasn't any part of me that was ready to confront what I'd just heard. There was only a quiet clinical side of me that took over the woman who once drafted million-dollar plans, who held her ground at conference tables full of men who didn't believe in female architects. That woman knew this wasn't personal anymore. It was structural. It was war. Back at the house, our house by the river, I stood at the sink, hands curled around the porcelain handle of the kettle, waiting for the water to boil. Steam whispered around my face, but I barely felt it. I could still hear their voices like an echo sealed in my spine. Drayton's cadence, professional, calculated. Callie's too confident, too familiar. This kitchen had once been my sanctuary. Now everything inside it seemed off. The copper pans, once warm with use, now hung too still. The oak table felt foreign, though I'd refinished it myself just last spring. I poured the water slowly over chamomile leaves, watched the steam rise, and turned to face the framed photograph on the sideboard. It was our wedding photo. Drayton and I 12 years ago. I was wearing a navy silk dress, modest, elegant. He stood beside me in a tailored charcoal suit, one hand on my waist, the other over mine. It had been a quiet ceremony, just family and a few friends. I'd been a widow for nearly 4 years then. Grief had reshaped me, hollowed me out in quiet places. Drayton had found me in that fog, patient and kind, and I'd mistaken steadiness for safety. Maybe that's what I needed back then. I carried the teacup into the study, set it down beside a folder I hadn't opened in months. Inside were old sketches, business filings, the remnants of the design firm my late husband and I had built together. It had merged into Ames Construction when I remarried, but I had always kept the original holdings close. I didn't trust digital copies. I trusted paper, ink, signatures. Flipping through my eye caught a stamp, licensing approved. My heart dropped. These were concept designs from 1993, my husband's final collection. They were never meant for sale, only for archival preservation, and yet the stamp said otherwise. I checked the approval date 6 months ago. No notation from me, no request past my desk. Who signed off? I moved to my desktop computer, the one I barely used anymore, and logged into the internal company records. It took 15 minutes to navigate the outdated folders, but there, it was a document trail. A transfer of ownership on 3 primary assets, designs, land rights, and a legacy trademark. Signed. Not by me. By Callie. Under a power of attorney form I never authorized. I picked up the phone, heart pounding in a slow, deliberate rhythm, and called Harold Brenner, our old company accountant. He answered cheerful as ever. "Eleanor, haven't heard from you in ages. I need to ask you something," I said calmly. "There's a transfer of intellectual property signed under my name from March. Did you review that? A pause. A long one. Then, I think that was handled internally. I wasn't looped in on that batch. Maybe ask Callie or Harold." I cut in. "Are you refusing to answer my question?" More silence, then a sigh. "Eleanor, I think it's best if you speak with Drayton about that." I hung up, not out of anger, but out of certainty. Harold was scared, which meant he knew, which meant this went deeper than I'd assumed. That evening, I returned to the project archive in the den and pulled out the backup drives. I found more than I expected: duplications of old land surveys, notes from Callie requesting digitization for legal clarity, and several encrypted PDFs labeled Client Transfer, Confidential. In one of the folders wedged between blueprint copies and zoning letters was a printout of an email chain. It was between Callie and a bank manager. The subject line read, "Asset Reassignment Trust Fund 14C," and in the body, my name used as the authorizing party, a direct forgery. And right then, I knew. Drayton hadn't just failed me. He'd enabled her. Whether out of greed or blindness, I didn't know. But I would find out. And this time, I wouldn't be anyone's fool. I drove out to my mother's house the next morning. An hour outside Charleston, past the old mills and long stretches of low country pine, her home sat unchanged, a modest brick one-story framed with hydrangeas. She still pruned herself. She was 87 now and sharper than most 30-year-olds I knew. Former school principal, twice divorced, wore pearls with her house robe and never apologized for it. If there was one person on this earth who wouldn't sugarcoat the truth, it was her. I didn't tell her everything, just enough to make it real. I said, there's something going on with Drayton and Callie, not an affair, something worse. She didn't flinch. She stirred her tea and said, I always thought that one had snake eyes. The pretty ones always do. I half laughed, but my chest was still too tight for anything real. I just didn't see it coming, I said. She looked up at me calm. That's because you still believe people love the way you do. But they don't, Eleanor. Most people only hold your hand so they can guide it to sign the dotted line. I stared at her, stunned, silent. Then she reached across the table and took my wrist gently. Don't get loud, she said. Bad people hate quiet more than anything. They can't stand not knowing what you know. I drove home slower than usual. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting a long orange trail across the water. And for the first time since this began, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't scream. I planned. That night, I reached out to Russell Grant, the attorney who had handled my first husband's estate. He still owed me favors. I told him I needed quiet, comprehensive legal clarity. No leaks, no assumptions. Next, I called Damon, the private investigator who once helped me expose a bribery ring on a zoning board deal back in Savannah. I told him this wasn't business. It was personal. Then I activated the old auditing clause embedded in the company charter. Under the guise of internal compliance review, I requested a full report of all transfers, wire payments, asset movements, and consulting invoices from the last 12 months. The CFO didn't question me. He still thought I was a harmless figurehead too sentimental to dig too deep. Perfect. Meanwhile, I returned to my role, gracious, forgetful, warm. I baked banana bread, brought lunch to Drayton's office, complimented Callie's perfume. I smiled when she spoke and pretended not to notice when she repeated things I'd already said, like she was testing my memory. What she didn't know was that I had begun recording everything. Voice memos, camera footage, calendar logs, every casual conversation, every stray comment. Because eventually these tiny threads would stitch together the truth. One afternoon, I found what I was looking for, buried in a Delaware registry under an LLC called Everset Consulting. Callie was listed as the founding director. The company had no real employees, no services listed, only an address linked to a tax shelter firm, and a suspicious trail of asset transfers. Most damningly, the registration date aligned exactly with the week I had undergone outpatient surgery, when Callie had been handling things on my behalf. The deeper I dug, the more foul it became. She had already applied for a temporary conservatorship over me in case of early signs of cognitive decline. The form was filed 2 months ago, and she had attached a falsified report citing inconsistent behavior and emotional distress. It was signed by a therapist I'd never met. That night, I reviewed the kitchen security footage. At 2:14 a.m., while Drayton was asleep beside me, Callie crept into the house using the spare key. She didn't go to the guest room. She went straight to the den. I watched her on screen, rifling through my drawers, flipping through folders, opening my file cabinet. At one point, she pulled out a document, read it, and smiled. Not out of relief, but satisfaction. And for the first time since this started, I smiled too. Because now I wasn't just hurt, I was certain. It was Drayton's birthday. I threw him a small dinner, just family. Old friends had moved away, and I had little patience for social theater. Callie came early carrying an overpriced bottle of wine and an effortless smile. Rhodes joined via video call from his flat in Copenhagen. I set the table myself, white porcelain cloth napkins, rosemary sprigs tied with twine. The kind of simple elegance Callie always mocked as quaint. During dessert, she leaned toward me and with a soft chuckle said, "Mom, you forgot the new accountant's name again. Maybe it's time for a little checkup. You've been so forgetful lately." Everyone laughed. I did too. Why not let her play her part? Let her think I was falling into her script. After they left, I returned to my study. I opened my laptop and launched the backdoor remote monitoring program I had installed on Callie's office computer months ago. I still had full IT admin rights. No one had ever revoked them. Most forgot I even had them. The camera was on. She was alone in her office, hair pinned back, tapping her pen against a stack of documents. Then Drayton walked in. I turned up the volume. "We need to slow this down," he said, frustrated. "She's suspicious. She's not as checked out as you think." Callie tossed the pen down. "That's exactly why we can't slow down. The moment Rhodes is back, she'll tighten her grip. We need her off the board before then. If you won't move, I will." Drayton sat rubbing his temples. This wasn't the deal. She stood over him firm. Then rewrite it. I sat back quiet. A sadness bloomed somewhere under my ribs, but I didn't feed it. There was no room for grief right now, only clarity. Later that night, my phone rang. It was Rhodes. "Hey, Mom, quick question." His voice was casual, but something in it wavered. "Callie mentioned you've been off lately. She's worried about you. Are you okay?" I smiled, not that he could see it. "I'm fine, sweetheart. She said you missed a few appointments and forgot the gate code last week. Let me ask you something," I said softly. "If anything ever happened to me..." Would you be surprised if Callie didn't inherit a dime silence? It stretched too long. "Then finally, I don't know what you're trying to say." "I know you don't," I replied. "Not yet." I ended the call and pulled out the latest batch of documents from the audit. And there it was, a $7 million deal with a firm in Shenzhen. Callie had signed the agreement as Acting Director of International Development, a title she didn't have. The signature mine, but it wasn't. Not even close. Drayton was losing his grip. That much was clear. He wasn't leading anymore, he was following. Whether it was fear, shame, or something worse, he was no longer the man who once held my broken hand and said, "We'll build something together." Now I was the only one building. A case, a plan, a reckoning. And when the time came, they'd learn something I had buried for too long. I don't scream. I don't threaten. I prepare. It came in a crisp white envelope, no return address, no warning. Just a court seal and my name. Petition for temporary conservatorship, filed by Callie Ames, supported by affidavit from Drayton Ames. Reason concerning behavioral patterns, suggesting early cognitive decline, impaired financial judgment, and repeated violations of internal protocols. I sat with the envelope on my lap for 10 full minutes, staring out at the river from my porch. The sun was setting bleeding gold over the water, and my mother's words echoed louder than ever. Don't get loud. Bad people hate silence. By morning, I was in Morrison's office. Robert Morrison, silver-haired, dry-voiced, loyal like oak. He'd overseen my late husband's estate and helped me preserve the original patents under my name. He'd seen the whole arc of my life, and he didn't blink when I dumped a folder of recordings, forged contracts, bank transfers, and notarized emails on his desk. "They're trying to erase me," I said simply. He flipped through the documents, expression unreadable. "If you do nothing," he said slowly, "they'll succeed. They'll turn you into a figurehead with no legal power, a ghost signing papers, and no one will blink." I nodded. "Then let's get to work." Callie had wasted no time. She was already whispering to staff about my upcoming health-related retirement. It was subtle, framed as concern, but the message was clear. I was stepping down. Out of love, of course. I made a few calls that night. Quiet ones. 2 of my former students, now prominent architects and minor shareholders in our firm, agreed to meet in private. I trusted them. I had trained them to read blueprints, budgets, and liars. We arranged a closed-door session in my home. No assistants, no electronics, just paper and trust. And then Rhodes flew home. He arrived with a duffel bag and guarded eyes. Callie had gotten to him. She greeted him at the gate like a war bride, tears worry, vague accusations. "Your mother's been watching me. I found software on my laptop. She's recording me. I don't feel safe anymore." That night, Rhodes called me privately. "Mom, are you okay?" "I am," I said. She's scared. Says you've been erratic." I paused. Rhodes, if something ever happened to me, would you still believe Callie deserved anything I built? He didn't answer, just swallowed. The next morning, I held the meeting with the shareholders. I had prepared everything, a video compilation of Callie altering financial contracts, editing metadata, and whispering instructions to a financial aide. I inserted the USB, opened the file. Nothing. Just a blinking cursor and an error message, file not found. I froze. Then I looked up. One of the shareholders, a younger man named Bennett, quiet, loyal to a fault, wouldn't meet my eyes. Callie had someone inside, and she had gotten to my proof before I could present it. I kept my face calm, thanked everyone for coming, and ended the meeting early. But inside, I was already regrouping. That evening, Rhodes confronted me. Callie said you planned a whole fake meeting just to scare her. She says you're paranoid. I smiled. Maybe I am. But I'll make you a deal. What kind of deal? I'll take every test. Blood work scans, cognitive evaluations. I'll do them all, but when those results prove I'm fine, Callie better be ready, because the only thing worse than being underestimated is being proven right. 2 weeks later, I walked into the courthouse, placed my hand on a Bible, and underwent a full psychiatric evaluation. I answered every question, took every test, remembered every sequence, and solved every logic puzzle. And when the results came in, they were as expected perfect. Clear mind, sound reasoning, high executive function, no signs of decline, no evidence of instability. Before those results even hit Callie's inbox, I made my next move. There was an obscure clause buried deep in the original corporate structure, a contingency authorizing emergency control of discretionary spending to a third party in the event of executive incapacitation. I activated it. Morrison, now officially my acting financial proxy, froze all transactions over $10,000. That meant Callie's grip on the accounts was temporarily severed. No transfers, no consulting fees, no misdirection. Then I called in a favor. I'd once helped a journalist expose a cover-up involving historical landmark misappropriations in Savannah. She owed me. Her name was Naya Rivers, and she was currently working on a feature titled Bloodlines and Bank Accounts, The Hidden War in Family-Owned Empires. I handed her everything I had edited, copies, names redacted. I didn't want revenge. I wanted light. Then I baited the trap. I drafted a fake email, frantic, in tone, riddled with mistakes, detailing a change of bank code for an emergency transfer. I made it look rushed, confused, and vulnerable. I left it open on my unlocked computer just long enough for Callie to accidentally spot it while visiting to check on me. 2 days later, that same bank code was used in a flagged attempt to transfer $500,000 into the Everset shell company. Transaction failed, but it was captured and logged and admissible. That night, I reviewed new audit logs and found something even more gutting. My CFO, the same man who had dodged my audit requests weeks earlier, had been promised a 6% share increase by Callie in exchange for his compliance. I felt the air thicken in my lungs. This wasn't a betrayal. It was a coordinated coup. Drayton showed up the next evening, not at the office, not through a lawyer. He came to the house, hat in hand, eyes older than I remembered. "I didn't want this," he said softly. "Not like this." I said nothing. She started with small things I didn't notice. Then it was too late. She made it all sound reasonable. "She made you sound like a burden." "Am I?" I asked. His eyes filled with something halfway between shame and pleading. "I loved you, Eleanor. I still do." I took a breath. "Then show me." I slid a document across the table. It was a formal relinquishment of all voting rights, financial ties, and access to any company resource bearing my name. "If you sign this, I'll let you leave with dignity. No lawsuits, no press." He picked up the pen with trembling fingers and signed. That same hour, Callie received a notification. Her transaction attempt had been intercepted, a formal complaint had been filed, and Rhodes, unaware of the entire bait strategy, received a copy of the report. But Callie didn't back down. She got meaner. By morning, she had retained a new legal team and filed an allegation of financial misconduct against me. Her claim I had manipulated company funds, abused my position, and was attempting to weaponize mental health law to strip her of marital rights. Let her try. I had a hard drive, a signed confession, a verified transaction, and a clean bill of health. I had everything I needed. But more than that, I had momentum, and for the first time in months, I could feel the war beginning to turn. It was a clear Thursday morning when I walked into the conference room. The space was already filling board members in tailored suits, a few loyal staff seated near the back, a couple of reporters clutching notebooks, and one woman from the county court registrar's office with a quiet authority in her eyes. Rhodes stood near the wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. This wasn't just a shareholder meeting. It was a reckoning. I stood at the head of the long glass table, the Charleston skyline gleaming behind me. I want to start by acknowledging the tension many of you have felt over the past few months. I began steady. There have been questions, whispers, shifts in leadership that didn't feel right. I paused. Then I clicked the remote. Slide after slide appeared on the screen scans of financial transfers, legal forms bearing forged signatures, a transcript from an intercepted transaction using the fake bank code, time-stamped logs from the internal server. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the projector. I didn't need to shout. The paper spoke loud enough. I clicked again, this time audio played. Drayton's voice calm but unmistakably complicit. Callie's colder, commanding. If we can get her to sign the asset transfer during her annual review, we can file for guardianship within the week. Once we prove she's no longer capable, the company is ours. A few gasps, a few shaken heads. I kept going. An internal email popped on the screen next, sent from our CFO to Callie promising to reroute compliance documents in exchange for preferred equity restructuring. The message was damning, but it wasn't the end. Then, like a script designed by fate, the doors opened. Callie walked in, late bold dressed for press photos, unaware of what was unfolding inside. She froze. Cameras turned. Rhodes stood straighter. I turned toward her. "Would you like to read the agreement you sent to your attorney?" I asked evenly, the one outlining how you'd assume full control of the Ames estate. After I was deemed legally unfit, silence. Her face paled, then flushed. She took a slow breath, then tilted her chin up. "This is a misrepresentation, a setup. She's been planning this. She's obsessed." I didn't flinch. I simply nodded to the assistant in the back who cued the final clip. There, in high definition, was Drayton sitting in a notary's office signing the relinquishment papers. I, Drayton Ames, voluntarily forfeit all voting rights, ownership stakes, and financial authority in Ames Holdings, effective immediately, stamped, sealed, irrefutable. I turned back to the room. Every legal authority Callie ever claimed came from Drayton, and Drayton no longer holds that authority. The room erupted not in noise, but in energy. Heads turned. Reporters clicked away. Shareholders whispered furiously. Rhodes sat down, his hands locked in front of his mouth, unmoving. And then the door opened again. Drayton walked in. He didn't look at Callie. He didn't look at me. He simply walked to the center of the room and said, "I've stepped away from everything. Eleanor is the rightful head of this company. The only thing I have left is the hope she might one day forgive me." Then he turned and walked out. The headlines hit within hours. CEO Eleanor Ames exposes family in shocking power grab attempt. Financial coup dismantled by matriarch at boardroom summit. Callie didn't stay. She bolted from the room, reporters in tow, shielding her face as camera flashes followed her down the hall. Rhodes didn't speak. He just stared at the screen, then at me. I could see it in his eyes, the fracture, the slow crumble of trust. It wasn't just his mother I had saved. It was the truth he'd refused to look at until it screamed back in his face. I didn't feel victorious, but I did feel free. The days after the meeting were quieter than I expected. The firm kept running, phones kept ringing, projects continued, but the weight had lifted, the whispers had stopped. I met with Morrison and filed no criminal charges. Not against Drayton, not even Callie. I don't want to destroy them, I said. I just want them out. And so my demands were simple. Callie was to resign from every legal and visible position tied to the Ames name. Her access revoked. Her signature voided. She would also repay the misappropriated funds. Within 60 days, Morrison documented the amount and provided a direct payment plan. I then took the final step. The company I had rebuilt with my late husband's blueprints, the one we shaped with every ounce of grief and grit after his passing, I restructured it. Ames Holdings was no longer a private firm. I converted it into a nonprofit trust supporting women entrepreneurs in Charleston and across the South. We called it the Foundry Fund, for women like me, for women who built without applause, who endured without complaint, who weren't just survivors, they were architects. A week later, Rhodes came to my door. He looked thinner, tired, older. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have seen it sooner." I didn't hug him. I didn't cry. I just touched his arm and said I never needed you to choose. I only needed you to look. He nodded. Then he returned 2 days later with his daughter, my granddaughter. She ran into my arms like nothing had ever happened. And in that moment, I understood maybe I wasn't the matriarch of the empire anymore. But I was still someone's safe place, and that was enough. Drayton left Charleston. No public goodbye, no plea for forgiveness. Just a letter, handwritten, waiting on my front step. "I failed you. Not just as a husband, but as a man. I believed someone else's vision over yours. I was weak, and I let that weakness become a weapon. I won't ask you to forget. Just know I was once better than this, and I am ashamed I didn't stay that way." I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer where I kept my wedding ring from my first marriage. A reminder of who I used to be and what I had survived to become. As for Callie, she vanished from the business world. A year later, I heard she was managing a high-end restaurant in Asheville. I didn't look into it. I didn't care. Let her live whatever truth she needed to survive. I took the old corporate office, once a monument to ambition, and turned it into the Charleston Women's Initiative Center. We hosted free workshops, funding panels, mentorship programs. The space filled with women whose voices had been silenced too long. On opening day, I stood by the front window, the same window where almost a year ago I had heard the first thread of betrayal. Now it framed sunlight laughter beginnings. It no longer marked the line between me and pain. It marked the doorway to justice I'd written myself. Later that night, I found a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Tucked inside was a small note scribbled in my late husband's handwriting, dated 1997. "If the world ever makes you feel invisible, remember this. Everything began with your hands, and no one can erase that unless you let them." I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I folded the paper, pressed it to my heart, and got back to work.